Good morning and welcome to Funliner News, where we bring you all of the juicy drama, breaking news, and all the latest coverage on all things Drum Corps International. Today on Funliner News, I'm going to bring you everything you need to know before the 2025 Drum Corps International season. I'll be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly, so strap in and let's get right to our first topic. As is the case at the end of every season, there's a lot of changes that happen with staff and design teams. And this year, there's particularly a lot happening in the percussion side of DCI. At the conclusion of the 2024 season, we learned that after only 2 seasons, Carolina Crown will be parting ways with front ensemble designer Kevin Shaw and battery writer Mike Jackson. If you didn't already know, this duo was previously at the Blue Knights before going to Carolina Crown, but they're also the brains behind WGI Independent World Class Champions Broken City. In 2023, when it was announced that Kevin Shaw and Mike Jackson would be taking their creative talents to Carolina Crown, many, including myself, saw this as a huge move that could potentially set Carolina Crown in a position to reclaim that elusive championship title once again. Because as many of you know, Carolina Crown is highly regarded for their brass, but percussion has always had a little bit of room to grow. So this change had huge potential, but after only 2 years with Carolina Crown, they've parted ways. Now, no one will know for sure exactly why this happened, but my sources tell me that it could be due to creative differences between the brass and percussion design teams. And this really makes sense when you think about how distinct of a sound the Kevin Shaw Mike Jackson duo has, and how that could potentially clash with the brass-focused formula that Crown has. So where does that leave us now? Well, the new percussion team at Carolina Crown consists of Cliff Walker, previously the percussion designer at the Cavaliers from 2018 to 2024, and Joe Hobbs, who was previously percussion staff at the Bluecoats and currently the percussion director at Vandergrift High School. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Crown has to bring to the table in terms of percussion, so we'll be excited to see what they bring out this year. As for Kevin Shaw and Mike Jackson, Shaw is now working with the Cavaliers as a music coordinator and sound designer, and as for Mike Jackson, as far as I know, he is not active in the 2025 DCI season. All right, moving on to the Mandarins. There's also been a change in percussion teams as they've parted ways with Ben Piles and Andy Filipiak and brought on John Mapes and Ian Grom as the battery and front ensemble designers. Have you ever heard of Pulse Percussion, 6-time world champions? They recently had back-to-back-to-back wins. Yes, those guys are now running percussion at the Mandarins. Now, the Mandarins have been on the rise through the past couple of seasons, moving up the ranks. But I think with this move, they could be contending for a world championship within the next 5 years. But if you're thinking, oh, all the kids who marched Pulse are just going to go right over to the Mandarins and boom, they're going to be competing for a percussion title, that's not exactly how it works. Most of the people that march Pulse usually go and march the Blue Devils, the Blue Coats, even SCV. But I believe there are some members from Pulse that are marching Mandarins this summer. And over time, we may see more overlap between the Mandarins and Pulse as they continue to move up the ranks. All right, that's enough percussion talk. Let's go ahead and get to the fun stuff and talk about what you can expect from your favorite corps this summer. Starting with the Blue Coats. The reigning champion Bluecoats have announced their music selections for this summer, including their second year of collaboration with artist group Sunlux, except this year they are directly getting original music from Sunlux, which is incredibly cool and very exciting for the activity as a whole. The Bluecoats Brass Instagram also posted a very interesting, well-edited clip going through the entire history of the Bluecoats shows, backed by the very eerie Rudyard Kipling poem, Boots. Could this mean that the show could potentially have something to do with war or with past Bluecoat shows? Or maybe it literally has absolutely nothing to do with the show. We'll just have to wait and see. All right, moving on to the Crossmen. They've announced their show titled Crosswalking, featuring a very jazzy selection of music, including works by Dave Brubeck, Charles Mingus, and surprisingly, one of my favorite songs, New Birth by the Funky Knuckles. They have a very kind of New York style of show going on with these crosswalks and urban kind of vibes, so that'll be interesting to see. I personally just hope they include that one walk sound that you click at the button when you're waiting for the light. Wait. The Academy show this summer is entitled London Fog, with some very spooky musical selections from the people like Michael Giacchino and Edward Elgar. Genesis announced their show Kaleidoscope Heart, featuring the Sarah Bareilles song of the same name. Madison Scout's show is called The Nature of Being, featuring music by Radiohead and Britney Spears. And this is kind of old news at this point, since they basically announced it when the Corps was still on the field for retreat in 2024, but the Troopers show is called The Final Sunset, and it's a continuation of the same storyline the Troopers have been doing for the past couple years. It'll feature some very cinematic music from movies like Mad Max Fury Road, as well as some Elton John and Mahler 2. The Blue Devils have not yet announced their show or any music selections, but I personally listened to a little bit of it, and I'll say that they definitely sound different. And I'm very excited to see the Blue Devils finally turn a new leaf in terms of music design, so look out for them this summer. All right, and some other things you should note from this summer. There's one rule change that was added at the DCI Summit this year that will allow the use of a single featured solo instrument of any kind, and that can be amplified or modified. So basically, woodwinds are allowed. So woodwind players out there, I know there's a lot of you guys. Hopefully you feel seen and heard. You now have a space in Drum Corps International. And finally, recent back-to-back open class champions, the Spartans, will now be moving up to world class. Well, kind of. Technically, they'll be doing kind of a hybrid season where they'll be competing at 8 shows as a world-class corps, and the rest will be as an open-class corps. But this is the first time DCI has ever done something like this, so it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out this summer. But good luck to the Spartans in their endeavors as a world-class group, and congratulations. All right, moving on to our final story of the day, and this one's juicy. This story involves some very recent drama that has been circulating regarding 2 marching health and wellness brands. This past week, on May 23rd, well-known marching band coaching and performance influencer Forte Athletics made a post on Instagram bringing to light their account of what they allege to be unprofessional business practices and stolen intellectual property conducted by another brand known as Marching Health. Now, disclaimer, I encourage you to go read the full post by Forte Athletics yourself, but to summarize, a few years ago, Forte Athletics, otherwise known as Daniel, the creator, was approached by another brand in the activity to create content for his brand. Now, Daniel doesn't explicitly state Marching Health's name in his post, but we all know that's who they're talking about, so I will refer to this other party as Marching Health, otherwise known as Elliot Cleveland, the founder. Now, years ago, Daniel agreed to produce a marching fitness program for Marching Health because he knew it would, quote, help the community. Daniel also told Elliot of Marching Health that he would finish the series first and they could handle payment after. So after the project was already well underway, they sat down to create a contract. And in that contract was a non-compete clause, which if you don't know what that is, it's basically a clause that generally prevents an employee to create or work for a competing business during or after the employment ends. So Daniel saw this non-compete clause and told Elliot, I'm already doing that, and I'm not stopping for this contract. Elliot responded, as long as the workouts are different, it won't be a problem. So Daniel signed the contract, claiming that it was in the interest of helping the community and helping a fellow creator. So about 3 months pass by and Forte Athletics is growing rapidly. Elliot is asking Daniel to create more content for Marching Health, and Daniel is declining. Finally, Elliot calls Daniel to acknowledge the conflict of interest and said he was terminating the contract with no formal paperwork or documentation, just a phone call. Fast forward 2 whole years later, according to Daniel, he gets a cease and desist from Marching Health's attorney accusing Daniel of stealing his entire business model. Daniel was confused because he thought the contract was terminated, but Daniel alleges that Elliot's response was, I did it verbally, but I never did it in writing. Daniel also states that this contract, quote, still restricts him for up to 3 years after termination, which that is what a non-complete clause does. In addition to this, Daniel alleges that Elliot solicited and worked with his biggest client without written permission from him. Daniel states that the truth is that this client reached out to him. I believe this client they're talking about is actually the Blue Devils. I remember Blue Devils was in collaboration with Marching Health first, and now they are working with Forte Athletics. So apparently in response to the cease and desist, Daniel showed, quote, evidence that disproved his entire case, and so Elliot presented an ultimatum stating, sign this deal, banning Forte from working in 9 big band states or face a 5-figure lawsuit. And he claimed that if he did this, he would drop all the charges. Daniel did not agree to this contract, and eventually Elliot allegedly left a voicemail saying he's going to drop all charges because he respects him too much. Okay, now here's where it gets really crazy. Marching Health was just recently announced as the official health partner of DCI. And apparently Elliot rebranded and trademarked one of his programs in Marching Health to be titled Marching Strong, which Daniel claims he coined in 2022. So that really brings us up to date on everything that went down according to Daniel. This is all based on his post that he made on Instagram. I reached out to both sides to see if they wanted to comment, and both declined to comment. But after making all of this very public, the community seems to have jumped to Daniel's side, creating the hashtag #IStandWithForte and flooding the Marching Health socials with comments in support of Daniel. Now, here's my personal take. If you're going to do business, even in a community that you love deeply, don't ever just agree to do work for someone and then figure out payment later. And definitely do not sign any contracts that you don't agree with. Now, I've met Daniel many times, and to me, he very clearly seems like a very generous and kind person who genuinely wants to make this marching arts activity a lot better and safer. But there's so many red flags throughout this business relationship that he could have avoided. Signing a contract with a non-compete clause when you literally have a competing business in the same field is just not a good move. So I don't know what Daniel was thinking when he signed that. I know that he said that it was in the interest of helping a community and helping a fellow creator, but at a certain point, you have to be smarter than that. Now, as for Elliot Cleveland and Marching Health, if everything that Daniel alleges is true, Elliot is a pretty vicious businessman who should not have anything to do with this activity. From what it seems, Elliot very clearly and deliberately saw a competitor, the only competitor, in his field and weaseled his way into getting Daniel to sign a contract that he could use to essentially eliminate his competition. Sending a cease and desist and then trying to get Daniel to sign a contract that bans him from working in certain states is really slimy. But in the end, Marching Health will have to pay the price one way or another. Recently, DCI made a post on Instagram about their new contract with Marching Health as the official partner of DCI. But after Daniel made this post about this whole situation, DCI took down that post about Marching Health. Does this mean that the contract between Marching Health and DCI is terminated? Probably not. But this definitely will affect Marching Health's future business opportunities. But if we look at this from a legal perspective, I believe that technically Marching Health does have the legal right and ability to conduct a business the way that they have. Daniel willingly signed a contract that had a non-compete clause, so legally they have the right to enforce that. But while it may be legal, it's also true that it is very unsavory and very unprofessional. All right, that's all the stories I have for you today and everything you need to know before the 2025 DCI season. My name is Everett Kim and this is Funliner News. I'll see you in the next one.